So I've got some good news and some bad news. The good news is I'm not going to talk about impeachment or whistleblowers. I think we've had enough about that this week. The bad news is I'm actually going to talk about you. So let's start with some questions. And I want you to kind of keep track. They're just yes or no questions. I want you to keep track internally of how many times you're saying yes and how many times you're saying no, okay? So, do you have enough food? Yeah, and these could be internal questions if you want. Because deeper in, you might want not to say it out loud. Up to you. Do you have enough money? Do you have enough time? Do you have enough good looks?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, he says. Do you have enough faith? Do you have enough health? Do you have enough friends? Do you have enough self-acceptance? Do you have enough God? Now, underneath those questions, all of them really is perhaps a deeper one. What does enough look like, right? But even if we go one more deeper than that, the question really is, in all of these, is, am I enough? Am I enough? This gospel story from Luke, the familiar feeding of the 5,000, did it happen? How did it happen? Those are not the important questions. And we're not even going to try to figure that out or talk about it. Why was the story told and what might it mean? Now that's something interesting. It's the only miracle found in all four Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. In fact, this story is so popular, so crucial, that it's not just told 4 times, it's actually told 6 times. Because in Matthew and Mark, there's not only the feeding of the 5,000, but there's the feeding of the 4,000. Only in Luke are they in a city. Every place else, they're in some deserted place. Almost every telling of the story has Jesus saying, "You give them something to eat." Almost in every story, the disciples are saying, "Could you please send these people away?" Only in John do they have apparently the treasurer along, because Philip calculates exactly how much it would cost to feed all these people, 6 months' wages. Only in John do we have a young boy sharing the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. But in nearly all of the accounts, we have Jesus showing compassion. They say because of his compassion. And in all the accounts, it's bread and fish, because that was the traveling food of the poor. In all of the accounts we have, there were great crowds. In every account, Jesus blesses, breaks, and shares the food. And in every situation, there were leftovers. Somebody say, "Love me some leftovers." This story is repeated so many times. And we have to ask ourselves, why was it so central to the early church? Remember, these texts, these stories were written within and for communities. So why was this so central to the early disciples? In fact, some scholars say that this was the story that was told at communion when they shared communion together. Well, I'm not sure. We've been talking about that Jesus was either coming from a meal, at a meal, or going to a meal, right? But perhaps what we've underestimated is how much time Jesus actually spent feeding people. Maybe we need to give him a little more credit for feeding people. Maybe the early church talked about this so much because they were, like we are, surrounded by need. Poverty and homelessness were as rampant then as they are now. And Jesus treated people's needs as holy. Maybe this story became so important because the early church was called to dream bigger. Or maybe it was that they really needed to know there was enough. That in the midst of what felt like scarcity, there actually was plenty. There was abundance. And maybe they just needed to remind themselves again and again of those words from Jesus. You give them something to eat. That they had a responsibility and they had the resources to live out that responsibility. Perhaps they were saying after Jesus left, now, remember, it's up to us, gang. It's our job now. And the message was important then and perhaps even more important today, because are we not surrounded by great need? California has the highest poverty rate in the nation. San Mateo County, according to Kevin Mullen the other night, San Mateo County is the poster child for income equality. Maybe you hear those words today. You do something. But I think deeply for today, we need this story, we need this message of enough as kind of a spiritual post-it note that we put up. Because we are part of a consumer society that is fueled by manufactured craving. Somebody say, I know that's right. You can't even scroll down a news story without some ad popping up. And tell me you haven't, oh, those look like interesting shoes. Click. Oh, right, I was reading about this. When our daughter was little, we didn't have her watch any commercial TV because we didn't want her to be wanting everything. And for the first number of years in her life, I can tell you that we would go places and do she never said, can I have that or can I want this? And well, let's just say that things have changed. And part of it is the constant message of craving that we don't have enough. It's on all of us. The message is you do not have enough to make you happy, so you need more. And underneath that is a fear like if we do not have enough, we will not be enough. And it drives so much of what is going on in our world and our society. That more, that grasping, that wanting, that craving. And sometimes it feels like the more we have, the actually more we think we lack. I don't know how this story happened. I don't know what really happened that day. Probably other people had food with them, and they were afraid to share because they didn't think they would have enough. But their hearts were somehow opened. And when they did share, it was revealed, yes, there was not just enough, but there were leftovers. The spiritual principle of there is enough. Because you know what? They had forgotten that they had each other. Just like we forget we have each other. And the spiritual principle that I know that I'm working with today and that I hope that you begin to work with on your own, that spiritual principle must start deep within. Because when we are worried about lack, we cannot be present to ourselves or to others. In my own life, even this week, there have been a couple moments when I have felt completely overwhelmed. Not enough time, whether it was in my work life or my personal life. I didn't have enough wisdom, enough strength. I didn't have enough peace. The need was too great. The problem was too big. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. And then what begins to happen, to me at least, and maybe it happens to you, when I get in that place, what it then turns into, as it feeds upon itself, is I am not a good enough pastor. I am not a good enough parent. I am not a good enough friend or wife or aunt. And the only way that began to slightly change is when I began to ask, in that place of not enough, I began to ask, how could God show up in this situation? Or if God doesn't work for you, how could love show up in this situation? I'm not alone. I forgot. I have people who care about me. I have people who know things that I don't know. I have people that have been in the same boat as me that I can reach out to. I have people that I can say, can you do this? Because I can't seem to do it. I have people who will remind me that I am enough. But it only pivots when I'm willing to say, how can I bring love into this? How can I bring spirit into this? You know, years ago, I asked Melanie to play this song. Years ago, there's a really, I admit, a very schmaltzy song. I mean, sometimes sentimental songs just work, right? But, so the song she's playing is called In This Very Room. Some people know it, really? Wow, okay. Basically, it says, in this very room, there's quite enough love for all of us. In this very room, there's quite enough joy for all of us. And there's quite enough love and there's quite enough power to chase away any gloom. For spirit. Spirit is in this room. And you know, I have not sung that song for a long time. But it came into my heart this week. And I remembered when we sang it, and we sang it when there didn't seem to be enough healing. There didn't seem to be enough of people supporting us. There didn't seem to be a way through. But when we sang it all together, something happened. Because we brought love into the situation. And even if it was for the time we sang the song, we could believe for a moment that there was enough. And here I am, 15 years later, after singing that song, being reminded that there is enough. And so I want to ask you today, where in your life are you experiencing a situation of not enough? And how can you invite love into that situation? Because there's enough. Maybe you need a spiritual post-it note. Maybe we just need to put them up different places that say there is enough. And how about this one? We have what we need. How about some abundance? How about we be reminded that we have each other? How about we ask, how will God show up? How can I invite love into this? And how about this one? Maybe we need to just wear it. I am enough. And when I'm feeling enough, then I can ask myself, how can I be the answer to someone's prayer today? I don't know about you, but I need those reminders because there's enough. 2 fish became many. It's a great fish. A couple loaves multiplied. Because when we believe that we don't have to live out of scarcity or lack, when we can receive that love and that help, tangible help, then there will be not only enough, but there'll be some left over to share with somebody else. So make your own little Post-it note and know that you are more than enough, and nothing can take that away. Amen.